All right, good day. Hi and welcome. Okay, kind of a short day. 3 hours. Well, it's not great, but not bad. Out there chainsawing again. Doing my chainsaw stuff. And yeah, so there's that. And it's noon. Now I can go fill my. I haven't heard the freaking garbage truck go by yet. So for the well, it's recycling today, so I got to fill the other garbage before I put it out. I'll probably do that today before I'm done. And yeah, so no, it started raining and it was starting to get slippy. I had to unlodge a tree today. Yeah, what I'm going to see is where the hell is my helmet? Did I put it out here? What the hell did I do? Okay, guys, I don't know where I put my freaking helmet. Maybe it's in her car. Might be in her car. I hope not, because I kind of need that. But I didn't have it with me today, and I didn't forget it out here. Because I never forget that thing. Where the hell did it go? Yeah. Where would I have put it? It has to be over there then. Didn't put it in the side. Yeah, I gotta find my freaking. I don't think I left it in my buddy's truck. That's a possibility. It's not right there. Nope, it's not right there. I'm sure I took it with me this morning, but I couldn't find it unless I left it. Where would I have left it? Where would I have put that thing? It's not like you can miss it. It's like it's bright orange. Huh. Yeah, because I really don't like working without it. I'll call my client after and say, hey, did I leave my helmet in the back of the... Where would I have put it, though? Yeah. I thought for sure I forgot it here. Huh. That's not good. That's not good. That's going to bug me. That is going to bug me. It's going to pop up somewhere. It has to. It's like... yeah. But I do recall grabbing it this morning. I'm sure I did. Unless I left it in my buddy. I must have left it. I either left it in my buddy's car or I put it in the lower seat. There. But I don't think I loaded anything on the side. So. Huh. Where could it be? Yeah, it must be in my buddy's car. Yeah, what did I do with it? Because I'm going to need that for tomorrow. I mean, I'll chainsaw without it, but I really don't. Like, I felt so vulnerable today without my, my hard hat there. It's one of those things that, yeah, it's like, it's like, you can just imagine all the bad scenarios, especially when you're working on a Widowmaker there. But I have a way of following them that's usually pretty safe. As safe as can be, so this one wasn't too bad, but it was lodged. It was lodged good. I put the chain on, yanked it, and kind of got it down to where I wanted, and then I started my cutting. So that way, cut a bit, pull it out a bit, cut a bit, and then let it kind of like come down like this. I would really like to know where that helmet is. Definitely don't want to lose that. That's a vital component of my. Yeah, I'm sure I probably forgot it in my buddy's truck. So unless I actually really don't remember if I did grab it this morning. Because I never leave it outside. I always leave it in here. Unless Marvin stole it. I mean, that's... Yeah. But it was late when I got in here last night too, so uh, drop all the equipment off. Yeah, I, I'm pretty sure like tomorrow I'll look at the back in my buddy's back of his truck. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, there it is, back seat there. So if not, I'm like, okay, yeah, don't want to be losing those. Those are like $60 a pop. And the upgraded one, the one I want to get is like 124, but like I can't really work in the bush safely without it, right? So like I'm always getting branches in the head and stuff like that. So like like brush and stuff hitting me. It's part of the job, right? So you definitely got to protect your craniums, and also too saws kick back, right? If it ever did come up at my face, I'll be eating sandwiches through my nose. You know what I mean? Um, yeah, if I have a face left. So it's like, yeah, I gotta find that. But yeah, though that saw, I gotta do my 1 year review on that MS400. What a great saw. The short answer is buy two. But the MS400.1, I really would like to see that thing. Um, how that one's going to hold up. Like still, pretty much any still you buy in any category of saw is an excellent saw. Like I mean, they've been making them so long now. Like if they can't make a good saw now, by now. Technically, every saw is owned by Punlay. Uh, Pretty much, like all the big brand, like Husky. Johnsert's no more. Johnsert's with Husky, but basically Punlay owns Stihl and Husky, so they are different saws. I do like if you go with Husky or you go with Stihl, you really can't go wrong. If you go with a Punlay or an Echo, they can be hit and miss because they're a little bit more prosumer. You can get professional saws though. It's just the problem with the Punlays and the Echoes and stuff like that. Echoes also owned by Punlay, I believe. Is that you can get a professional saw, but they don't sell enough professional saws to charge professional saw money. So, like, you're always getting a slightly, built to price kind of saw where the Stihls are built to, they're not built to price. You know what I mean? They're built to do the job, and people rely on them, and you have them for years and years and years and years and years. Like I've done an awful pile of cutting with that MS400. I've done way more cutting. I thought I would be doing more cutting with my little saw, which I did a fair amount of cutting with it this year. But like it's the MS400. It's like I almost grab it every time, unless it's like a really tight spot. I almost always grab the MS400 because it's so easy to work with. Like I just worked the past 3 hours with it, and 20-inch bar on it, back's not sore. I do plan on getting a 28-inch bar though, just so I could stand. Like when you get small stuff like that, like whatever you lose in power, it doesn't really matter because it's small. But it's the fact that okay, you might get a little bit more weight but less bending. So you gotta with a saw. I always try to get away with the lightest saw possible. I think that the smallest saw you could put, you probably have to upgrade the oiler, but would be the 392. You could probably put a 28-inch bar on there, and just use that as your limbing saw, like like small stuff. Is that Mary? Hard to tell. It's kind of windy out there, so I was like, can you hear things kind of shuffling around in the house? But is it Marvin or is it just the wind? Yeah, I'm like Marvin paranoid. But yeah, no, it's a great saw. Once I get the 28-inch bar, I'll just have the one. I'll use it. I'll probably get 2 chains for it. I'd like to get a second 20-inch bar. And that's my 2 main bars. I'm not going to bother with a 25. I'm just going to go like 20, 28, and then one 16-inch bar for like specialty when I got to go up a tree and top the tree, but I need a little bit more power. Or maybe I got like you go up the tree, but you're taking off a branch instead of the actual top of the tree. But you got like say like a branch that thick, you know what I mean, which the little saw can cut through, but it's a bit much for a little saw. So, um, yeah, that's what I'd rather do. Uh, and then if I ever have the money for the, coming in enough for the big boy saw, I could have the 25-inch bar on that. And, like, I mean, big boy saw, I mean, like, big, like really big. Um, it's not a saw that you use all the time, but whenever you get like a big hard oak or like a gigantic pine or a gigantic dead Manitoba maple, those things, Manitoba maples, the tree itself is usually pretty easy to cut up, but when you get down to the stumps are as hard as a rock. Yeah, like, so it's you can get through them, but sometimes you got to wait a little bit, right? That elm I'm cutting elm this big, and like I'm seeing smoke coming off that, and my chain sharp. You know what I mean? Like it's cutting good, but it's like that stuff when it dries out, man, it can be pretty tough to cut. So for stuff like that, that's where the big saw comes in. But like the big saw, you just use it for the big parts, and then once the tree's down, saw up the butt blocks with the big saw, and then start working your way onto the smaller saws, and then maybe if the 400.1 comes out, or the 392 is such a great deal because they're going to discontinue it, right? So I'd love to be able to get it at a discontinued price, and then you put the 28-inch bar on the smaller, lighter saw, and you use that as your when the tree's down, you want to cut all the all the stuff overhead. You got this long bar that you don't have to. You could just you don't have to do all the bending. And that's what all the guys out east are doing is everybody makes fun of them with the long bars when they're cutting stuff this big. But it's like, yeah, but the guy's standing up completely straight. You know what I mean? Some people use a 32-inch bar. I think 32 would just be way too long for the 400 to be practical. But I think a 28 would be practical for standing up and bucking. Like a 32, I'd like to have one, but like, I would probably get a 32 with a skip chain on the lighter saw, like if I got a lighter saw. The smallest saw I can get those size bars on again are like the 392 because it uses the same chain and chain pitch as the 400. So you probably say, well, why didn't you just buy the 392? Well, I wanted something with more power. So for the half-pound weight difference or whatever it was, it's indistinguishable between the two saws. Like the 400 is light enough that it would be indistinguishable at the end of the workday if you used a slightly lighter saw, unless you went down to say the 261, then you would notice it. But even at that, I feel like I'm using a saw as light as a 261 all day. Like with the 400, like it's at that weight where it's like it's kind of inconsequential whether you go with a lighter saw or not, right? You're not going to be any more or less tired if you're using the 261, which is a 50cc saw, or the 400. Go for the 400 because the power is noticeably more, and you can run a bigger bar, which means less bending. 20-inch bar works really well. Like it's a good all-arounder. It's not. I've used 18. 18 always seems to come up a little bit short. 16 is great for tight areas. If you need a lot of power, if that's what I loved about my MS 260 was the 16-inch bar was like really agile because you could get anywhere with it. Like that saw, you can work with that all day. You can work with it with one hand. It's a little bit too big as a tree climbing saw. But you could do a lot of work with the 50cc saws. It's just got to wait for them a little bit. Like that saw, like my MS 260, God knows how much I've cut with that. But that 400, that thing, because I haven't done stove wood with it yet. I haven't done the stove. It's all been tree felling. You know what I mean? Like I clean up trees. Manitoba maples is probably what I've cut the most with it. And On this property, I'm going to be cutting, like, there's probably 30 of them right there that I'm going to be cutting just in that corner, and then all the other stuff. So I mean, in 1 year, I've probably cut, if you were to actually cord it up, because some of it is like I follow the tree and I do stove wood it up. Probably, we'll say 20, 30 cord I've probably cut with it already. If you were to, like the cleanup trees, I don't cut it exactly stove wood lengths, but you got to cut it into a manageable, manageable branches and stuff like that. So probably, yeah, 15 to 20 cord just this year alone, uh, with that saw, right? So yeah, that's probably about right. If I think about it, like it's probably about right. I'm trying to like visualize all the piles of wood I cut all over the place at all the different clients and stuff like that. So it's like, yeah, I cut that up, I cut that. It was like a couple of hundred trees that I probably cut with it. Most of it about this size. So it's hard to tell, right? But until you see it in the pile. But I'm visualizing. Like I did 3 or 4 cord just for one client, and then I cut up, some stuff for me. There was like what, 3 or 4 cord or 5 cord that I cut for me and my dad. Yeah, so probably 15, 20 cord, but mostly cutting up trees, and then cutting up the branches and shit like it's just the saws. Pretty much I use it just about every week, right? In the peak grass cutting, that's what I focus on, but it switches over, right? So still on the original chain, still cutting straight, still on the original bar. I've got that bar I keep in good shape. Like I flip it every now and then. Like after I'm done this, like tomorrow I'll probably flip the bar again because I flipped it not too long ago. And just to kind of keep the wear pattern of the bars, because a bar will eventually start to twist on you and stuff like that. You'll notice it when you go to plunge cut. You'll start to get one of these things happening when your bar starts to twist. It does weird things. So if you keep rotating it, it seems to wear out in it, more evenly. If that, and the other one is when you're cleaning out your bar. Like when you get your scratch, you have like a little tool on it that allows you to zip through the bar, right, and clean the groove of the bar. But the problem with that is it widens out the bar, and then what happens is it wears your tooth on your chain, and the bar will always wear to one side or the other a little bit more. So when you're cutting a big block, what happens is about halfway down the block, you start to see this happening, right? And then when you get near the end of the block, you're just revving the saw and you're not cutting it because you're binding it up. And a lot of people think, oh, the saw doesn't have enough power. No, it's your bar's done. Now, mind you, sometimes what can happen is you can buy a tool that can realign that channel, and you get a little bit, maybe an extra year out of the bar or whatever. But you only notice it on really, really large blocks where it has, it's coming like on a block like this, you probably get through, but you always got like a crooked cut. Like you started off nice and straight, but it always comes out. But you get a block this big, and about there, it's like, okay, now it's jammed up. It just, you literally can barely cut through it. Like it's literally, starting to work into a circle, right? That's when your bar is really worn out. You can put a new chain on, it's not gonna help. It's not gonna help. That saw, like, you test it like every now and then. Grab a block, set it up as level as you can, and just check your cuts. You know what I mean? You can do that once in a while. But I'm always cutting a tree that's on an angle like this or whatever, and if it's on the ground, it's just like I might have one end propped up. So I just look at the cut. I can tell if the cut was straight, right? But on the small blocks, you can't really tell. It's just a way to monitor the wear and tear on your bar and your chain. If your chain's really worn out, then yeah, it'll it'll wear out your bar if you don't run the right tensions on your chain. I've talked about it enough in other videos about like tricks, especially when you really stretch your chain. I've only really stretched that chain maybe twice this year, where it's like, okay, that was a hard cut, and you pull it up, it's hanging at the bottom of the saw. I only did that maybe about twice this year, so okay, that chain got hot, right? Tighten up a bit, and then right at the end of the day, when I was done cutting, just like back the bar nuts off, just so that it doesn't put too much tension on the chain and wear it out more. Because usually the chain will, it'll get hot and it'll expand, and then it'll come back if you once it cools, right? And then if you don't have too much tension on it, because what people do is like, oh, my chain's loose. It's not loose. It's it's your chain got hot. The oiler, I didn't know if that oiler was adequate for that bar and chain, but it appears to be. I would like a little bit more oil coming out, but it's doing the job. Like it's just I'm used to a chain being gunked in oil, right? So, like a drop or two every now and then is usually adequate, and you're not wasting any more oil than you need to. That saw is a little bit thirsty, all fairness, but I do get a lot of cutting. Like I did 2 tanks today in 3 hours. So, there was a lot of RC, like it's not like 3 hours go and solid cutting on that, no. But like in 3 hours, I burnt 2 tanks because, you cut a bit, you clear a bit, you got to pull this out of the way to get to that, you got to clean up this, you got to clean up that. And that's why like people that get really hung up on how fast the saw is, like if you were to take a 500i and put it up against this saw, the difference would be for the same given bar length with brand new chains, you'd probably say, okay, what would take that 10 seconds to cut through, the 500i might cut it in 7.5 seconds. It's faster, it's noticeably faster, but it's not like going to make a difference at the end of the day by much. Unless you're just doing rounds off a stove with somebody's lining all the logs up for you and you're just cutting and cutting and cutting. Yeah, then you'll probably notice a difference. Because every 10 seconds you're gaining 2.5 seconds of cutting. Okay, over an 8-hour day, that would add up, maybe a little bit extra. But in reality, if I'm in the bush with a guy that has a 500i, it'll be indistinguishable who's going to cut more trees. We're going to cut about the same size trees in the same amount. Just because you got to move this, you got to roll that, you got to mess around with this so you don't get it jammed. Like especially when you're doing like the lodge tree, a warped lodge tree, like I was doing today. There's a little bit of a trick to unlodging those things, right? So it's like I didn't in this tree. I couldn't do the fancy thing where you put it on the pole and get it to slide out. And it just more work than I would have needed to do anyway. I just basically do like a half notch. So my tree's like this. I do a half notch and I score it the same way I would if I was using a pole arm saw. And then I score it just enough so that the idea is that if the tree starts breaking while you're cutting, your notch isn't like, if your notch is here and your tree's like this, right? And your notch is like this, you don't cut right where that is, because what'll happen is it'll start to do that and it'll bind your chain. You cut it a little, maybe about an inch or two, maybe you got to do 2 cuts, whatever, maybe do 1, 2, and then you go, okay, and then when it starts to let go, it breaks loose and the thing comes down, and it normally doesn't take your bar and chain with it. But as soon as you start to see it go, you just back it off a bit, and if it just falls a bit, just grab an axe or something, or even kick it with your, hit it with something that usually breaks and down it comes. And then you do another one. And then if it's a small enough tree, you hook onto it with a chain, whatever, and you pull it. So you always want like an angle like that. You don't want this, right? Tree lodge that's like this, that's the Widowmaker. The one like this. You want this. This is easy, this is hard. Right? Why? Because they roll. The straighter up they go, they're more likely to roll on you. And roll with dead branches above you. Yeah, especially when you lost your freaking helmet. your chainsaw helmet. Yeah. Live life on the edge today, that's for sure. Yeah, so like there's ways to deal with stuff, but no, I really love that saw like you wouldn't believe. I'll do a proper, a good and proper review of it fairly soon. So, got to use it again tomorrow if the weather allows. Finish up one job, and then Wednesday I may have to start sawing some more wood on Wednesday, because depends if I don't know if it was this week or next week that Perry was supposed to fall. Like, there's some trees that, like, when I get to trees, I never tell people I can do something I can't do, right? And I always hate to tell people no, but I'm honest enough to tell them that this is why I'm telling you no, is because I don't have the equipment to do it safely, and if I get it wrong, okay, you're gonna have more damage. You know, like it'll fall on your house, right? If I get it really wrong, I die in the process. You know what I mean? So it's just, I hate to have to get a guy that's more expensive than me, but. And like, I'd rather give the work to somebody who has the equipment to do it. I don't have, when a skidder is required, it's required. Like, you'll probably just hook onto it with the skidder, just notch it and just pull it down with the skidder. You know what I mean? Do it that way and just pull everything down without, just break it down, and then, that way nothing lands on the house, right? So, but once he gets it on the ground, he can save a little bit of money by getting me to cut it up for my client rather than him, right? So it's like about three or four maple trees that'll have to be cut up. Plus, it gets turned into expensive stove wood, but I do it, no problem, and I've got the saw to do it, so no problem, right? So my whole thing with the saw setup is to have chainsaws that are like cover a range, right? So like the 162, where I need that, the 400 is just too overkill, and whatever, like, especially when you're in close to like a fence or something like that, or you're doing a deck. Yeah, don't use a 500i to do decks. Like, if you're just cutting the old deck away, no problem, but if you're just doing one board, and you want to do the plunge cut on, it's just too fast. The 400 is just too fast. The 260 was too fast doing that. You end up nicking the boards beside it, and you don't want to do that, right? So, long story short, one more big boy saw. I'll only need the one big boy saw unless I really get some tree jobs that are just like, okay, all giant pines, giant this, giant that, and then I need the monster saws more often. Okay, maybe I have two monster saws, two mid saws, and one extremely small saw, maybe two small saws if you need them. Because like, I'd like to get, like, I enjoy working with a chainsaw, but I also don't want to work in the bush. Like, I just, it's not that I don't like the work, it's just the work is very, very backbreaking, and there's only times of the year that you really like doing this stuff. Okay, yeah, it's miserable weather today, but this cooler weather is a lot easier to work with a saw. Middle of July, I don't want to be working with a chainsaw in the middle of July. It's too damn hot and too much, too labor intensive, right? You know what I mean? But clean up a storm tree here, clean up a storm tree there. Property trees are. I don't mind that, because it's not, so tedious that all the time. It'd be different if I was 20 years old, making money doing that. But I do like a chainsaw day is a fun day not fun, but it's an enjoyable day for me when I get to play around with the chainsaw and work out how I'm going to follow this tree. Like, I like that kind of challenge, right? If you said, okay, you can only ever make money with the whippersnipper or the chainsaw, I'd rather go with the chainsaw, but my body says the whippersnipper is easier on me. You know what I mean? So there's that. So the saw is paid for itself. Well, I took my brush cutter today with me, but I didn't need it, so I'll need it tomorrow for sure. And then I'll need the saw tomorrow for sure, and the pole arm saw tomorrow for sure. So We got to get some ladders there too, though. I'll have to use my buddy's ladder. And then I got to, like over the winter, if the money allows, start stocking up. Like I got one spare chain for the 400, and I've got the chain on it, right? And I've got two spare chains for the 162. However, the original chain, I think I burnt it out the first weekend. Poor saw. Again, that's what I bought them for. Taking out little stumps and shit like that. I think I hit oh no, I know what it was. It was that freaking Manitoba maple with all the freaking fencing grown into the center of it. Yeah, that one done in the chain. I had to sharpen it like 15 times. It was just like, it was so wrecked. I'm like, okay, well, I'll see if I can bring it back in the fall. Just see if I can resharpen it up and regrind it. Like, those chains are cheap enough that it's like, is it worth having the still shop, sharpen it for $12 plus tax or whatever? My big chain, yes. Like for the big saw, yes. And I, get original grind on it. But I'm like, my saw is still cutting good, and I'm sharpening it. Like, I can sharpen a chainsaw pretty darn good with just a file. And that, like, all those jigs and everything like that, they are fancy. Like that 3-in-1 file thing. It's really good. But for the money, like once you get good with just a file, you just need a little handle on the file, and the flat file, you can just leave it the way it is. You know what I mean? It's one of those things that it takes a little while to get it. But the thing about the jigs is, like, you don't do that on the job site. You sharpen it by hand on the job site. But what you do with the jig is, okay, that's what brings it back to a factory hone. If you take like an hour to do it, you know what I mean? Like, you set up each tooth perfectly, you get it right back to factory, or just about, or you take it in and you do that. Like, I have chainsaw sharpening jigs, and I never, like, they're so cumbersome, and I don't really use them. When I see, like, I see potato chips coming out of the bottom of my saw all the time. So if you know what I'm talking about, like, I don't see dust, I see potato chips coming out the bottom of my saw all the time. And that's what you want, right? You want the chisel effect, where the tooth actually just takes out like a shaving, right? An actual shaving, not just grinding its way through like a sander belt. You know what I mean? If you see fine sawdust coming out of your saw is dull. You know what I mean? I do want to experiment with different types of chains eventually. Like maybe more aggressive chains for different types of wood. Somebody was telling me that there was different types of chains, one for hardwood, one for softwood. And I'm like, I've never heard of that. Like, I know there's different type of chain types. Like, I know there's different chain types. That I'm completely aware of. But I've never heard of, like, wood specific chainsaw chains. If you guys have, let me know. It's just I've never heard of it. But I know there's like the skip chain and stuff like that for weight reduction on like really long bars, right? So, but you use those more for limbing and stuff like that, because like you're missing a tooth. It means the chain isn't gonna, like, you have, like, it skips a tooth. It's a skip chain, so every second tooth is not there, which allows more speed on a longer bar. But I don't know how much difference it is for the cutting. It's mainly to reduce weight. That's the main thing. So if you've got like a 32-inch bar, there's a lot of teeth in there, right? So the big boy saws typically use it. I don't know if those, like if you were to, go into a big oak or an elm with that, like maybe, like if it would just overheat the chain and kill it. But like on a big bar, like 28.5, 28, 32, 36, 48, like I'll never have need for a 48-inch bar around here. Yeah, cool to say you have a 42, 48 inch bar, but you're going to spend $300 on something you're never going to use. You know what I mean? Oh, but I'll be able to stand up and buck 28 inches will do it. Like I was debating between the 32 and the 28, and the 28, knowing what it's like with a 20, I'm just like, I'm pretty happy with a 20. You know what I mean? Like a 20-inch bar, I'm pretty happy. I still got to bend over a little bit. And I know the 25 would be, I'd lose a bit of power with the 25, but I know I'm going to lose a lot more power with the 28. But I know with the 28, I'll be standing straight up and down. Like, that I think would be the better way to go. If I get a big saw and I just leave the 25 on there as the compromise, like, okay, well, the 20, like I've already got a saw with a 20 on it. And like, I know that my saw, if I were to pick one bar for the MS400, and let's say you're going to buy the saw without a bar, I would probably go with an 18 just to get a little bit more snap out of it. I wouldn't go with the 16, but if you're doing what I'm doing and you're not doing like really monster trees, I would definitely keep the 20 on there. The 20 it's just perfect all around. Again, I'm sure when I put the 16 on there, that thing will be a Ginsu knife. Like, it's already a fast cutting saw. It's a decent saw. It's a really good saw. It's just, if you wanted a little bit more cutting power, you'd go with the smaller barb. The 18 would be a good compromise, so you'd get a little bit more snap and whatever. 16 would be just too short. You know what I mean? 16 is, I'm climbing a tree and I got to take a branch off or something like that, and I don't want a 20-inch bar up there. Mainly to reduce weight and cumbersome moving around, while you're in the tree. Maybe you got to fall like 4 or 5 branches off the tree, something that the polar arm saw can't really get. Because I've already climbed the tree with the 20-inch bar, and trust me, it's cumbersome. You get up on the ladder, it's like, it's tricky. It's tricky, where a 16-inch bar would make life a lot easier because you're so close to the damn tree, right? As long as the branch isn't thicker than a 16-inch bar, right? But yeah, I've got like some cool methods of cutting stuff, and like there's skills that you acquire and change. When you acquire different skills, it changes your requirement for the equipment, right? So, like, for example, going from a small chainsaw to a polearm chainsaw. Polearm chainsaw is very labor intensive to use that thing, just because of the nature of it. You're always off balance a bit. You gotta, it's a cumbersome object to be like. It's not hard to use. It's not that bad, but if you got to use it for a couple of hours, you're going to feel it the next day in your back and your shoulders, because you're offset all the time with this 10-inch pole, right? Or a 10-foot pole, right? It's literally 10 feet, so it throws you off a bit. You got like a big bulb at one end, and then you got a weird little chainsaw at the other end, so it does the job. It's pretty sweet. I got to sharpen that for tomorrow for sure. But I would also say, like, if you were the type of person that, okay, you're just starting out and I had to recommend you, okay, you're like, Reg, I'm going to be doing trees. The first thing I'm going to ask you is the size of trees you're doing. Let's say you're doing yard work stuff. You know what? Start with the like, again, if you can find a good running MS-170, the smallest chainsaw that they make, or we're making now, it's the 162. I went with the 162, even though there was a 170 available. But I went with it just because I already had the 170, right? So it's like I have it, and I might be able to, Mini Beast. I still have him. If I can get him running again, like, that thing was great for going up trees and stuff because it was so light you could almost use it with one hand. Eventually, I might get a top handle saw. Those things are god awful expensive. But if I have to climb a tree, like let's say you're climbing trees all the time, okay, spend the money on the arborist saws. They're about 4 times the price of a regular saw in its same size, but the fact is you can use them with one hand. That's literally what it comes down to, is you can use them with one hand, and for knocking off branches. And then as you come down the tree, you start getting bigger saws, right? You can get bigger arborist saws, but like unless you're doing that all the time, I wouldn't want an arborist saw, for example, for like the stuff I do on the ground, because it's number one way to. I have an arborist saw. I just got to get it all fixed up. It's a little bit too heavy. It's an older arborist saw. It's that 009 that I got. But the biggest issue is, what are you going to use most, right? So like my little saw is, the tree tangerine I wanted to give it to my dad, the Husky 235. That was a great little saw, like 39 cc's or 31 cc's, whatever, 35 cc's, whatever it was. That saw was fantastic. I had a 16-inch bar on it. The amount of cutting I did on that saw, I paid $250 for that saw. I sold it to my dad for $200. I gave it to him, but he insisted he wanted to buy it, and it was such a great little saw. Like it was a little finicky, with the carburetor and all that. But what a great saw! What a great saw! It paid for itself over and over and over again. But even at that, Mini Beast was the 170 was the snappier of the two saws with the 13-inch bar on it. It was just fantastic for yard work. It was laughable the size of trees I was actually knocking down with that tiny little saw. Paid $200 for it. I paid too much for it, but it made itself back so many times. Now Tree Kong, that would have been a cool big saw to have. Would I have ended up buying the MS400 if I had that saw running good? Probably would have held out for a little while, but chances are, it still would. And that would be a nice big boy saw. The 272 is a very legendary, great tree falling saw. Like, it's one of the best tree falling saws you could ever get. 272, 372. I've used both of them lots. Probably used the 372 maybe a little bit more than the 272 over the years, because that's what my buddy has. I'm sure the 572 is even better, but they're legendary. But the thing with the Tree Kong was that I couldn't get it running, right? And I have an idea why it wasn't running, but it wasn't my saw, so I couldn't break into it, break it down and start working on it, because it's like, oh, okay, I tried to get it going, and I brought it back, said, look, I couldn't get it going. I need something reliable, right? I think it comes down to a common issue with those is the wire for the kill switch tends to break off, and when it does, you can't start the saw, right? It's a very common problem with those. But like if he ever does get it going, he says, Reg, I got it going. Would you be interested in the saw? I'd be like, yeah, I'll need it for about I'll need to be able to use it for a week or two. You know what I mean? To know if to find, like, I'm gonna have to do some cutting. It had a brand new Oregon bar on it, 20-inch bar on it, and it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to do some cutting with it to say if I'm gonna put down $400 for this thing or work it off, I got to make sure it's gonna make me more than $400, right? So I'd do a job with it, and I wouldn't abuse it or anything like that. And if I broke it, I bought it. You know what I mean? But the thing is that with the brand new saw, you don't even think that way. It's just like, no, it's brand new. It's got a 2-year warranty. I have any problems, I'm just calling up the still shop. Yeah, you guys there? Yeah, bring my saw, fix it. Here's the warranty, fix it. They have it all on the computer anyway. So if you lose a receipt or whatever, well, let's say after 4 years something goes wrong with my MS400. Well, after 2 years, well, how many times is that saw going to pay for itself in 2 years? You know what I mean? Like it's already paid for itself more than once, probably about 1.5 times in the last past year that it owned it, right? And that's all the saw, like my two new saws, whatever. So I look at it in that kind of terms, right? I guess I could talk saws all day, but I guess what I would recommend for people, is obviously tool to the job. If you're tight on cash, starting with a small saw is better than no saw, but that small saw will probably get you enough little jobs to pay for the bigger saws. That's what happened for me. The thing is you need a saw that is reliable enough to last long enough to recoup itself and earn enough to get you to the next saw. What happened with Mini Beast is the trigger kept letting go on them, and I couldn't rely on them anymore. And I had already gotten rid of the tree tangerine, which was good and reliable, but the problem is I sold it to my dad, right? Because I wanted to keep the still. And then my other saw was already broken by that time. So the two little saws basically paid for other equipment. So the amount of equipment I got this year, in the last past year, the pole arm chainsaw, the two main chainsaws, and the brush cutter, plus, another $400 or $600 worth of tools. Everything I bought this year made money more than just zeroing itself out. Like the rakes, my pulp hooks that I just bought, I use them all the time. You know what I mean? $70 worth of pulp hooks have probably already made me $700. You know what I mean? So the return on investment is just great. So once you get the initial stuff that you need, for me, I worked it out that the biggest chainsaw or medium chainsaw, to basically have for all around, and then the smallest chainsaw. Don't bother with the chainsaws unless you're going for a one chainsaw setup. The only chainsaws you should look at from Stihl is their very smallest professional one for little stuff, and if you're doing stove wood, but you're not cutting anything bigger than 16-inch, and you're not doing the falling, the MS260 is a no-brainer chainsaw for 90% of the people on the planet that need a chainsaw. That chainsaw is probably all the chainsaw you'll ever need, right? Especially if you're just doing stove wood. You're not cutting trees that have 20-inch base to it or 40-inch base to it or whatever, or some of the ridiculous trees that I get from time to time. It's like these Manitoba maples that, I got one out there. It's probably about 3 or 4 feet around. I gotta take it down at some point. You know what I mean? I got to get this one out here in the yard. So the point is that you pick the tool to the job. Start with what you can afford the most. But if you have new, my MS162, what am I going to run that for 10 years? It's like it pays for itself about every two days. You know what I mean? It's 2 or 3 days of work with it, and it pays for itself. So is that not a saw that's worth the peace of mind of having a brand new saw? Looking for all this stuff used, that's fine for people that don't rely on it for a living, or they've already got some saws and they're just looking for a backup. Okay, fine, I get that. But no, buy good tools. Invest in your tools. And if you do that, what you'll find is that, okay, you get the saw, okay, it's paid for itself. Okay, now you start stocking up on chains. I'll probably have 6 or 8 chains for that MS162. I'll probably never use them all in my lifetime. You know what I mean? I'll probably, because how long does a chain last? If you keep it sharp or something like that. The chains, usually what gets them is hitting metal objects and hitting rocks and fences and stuff like that with them. That's usually what does in my chains. And the saw I use for that is the smaller saw. The bar, I might go through maybe, if you go through a bar every 5 years, 3 to 5 years, I'm 52, so if I retire, like in the next 17 years, if I'm allowed, or next 15 years or whatever, which I doubt it, but I'm on the work till you die program. But if that ever happens, like I have buy all the tools and files and everything you need for that, amount of the life cycle of the saw, so you're not running back to the store all the time, right? So get the saw, get everything to support the saw, regardless of the saw. So if you buy a big boy saw, don't be that guy that just, okay, I need a saw, so I'm just going to get the biggest saw I can that's on the market just because I want to make sure I have enough power to cut things down without, whatever. It's not always about the power or the speed of the saw. Like, I get it, yeah. If you need a big saw, you need a big saw. But like the MS400 could clear probably more than half the trees in Quebec, and it would be like if that would be a saw if that was the biggest saw on the planet, it could probably cut half the trees on the planet down. It's adequate size to that. You like whatever size your bar is, you could typically cut a tree 2/3 to double the size of that bar. If you know what you're doing. What I mean? If you don't know what you're doing, a 20-inch tree, okay, you're good. Like a 20-inch tree, or 20 inches of cutting into a tree, that tree could be probably 36 inches round, and you can notch it well enough that when you start going into it, it's going to really go over no problem. It's more your cutting techniques and everything like that. And that I'm talking big oaks, elm, you name it. It's the elm is more about having your chain sharp. Like you will have to sharpen your chain even on small elm. Like I got to sharpen that chain for tomorrow. You know what I mean? But I've done a pile of cutting since my last sharpening, which was I sharpened it twice the last time I cut the elm. You know what I mean? And it's all small stuff, but it's just it's hard as a rock because it's dead, right? And the thing about that is that even at that, like the chain's still cutting good. You know what I mean? So like if I was going to go fall, like say somebody wanted me to fall a big oak tree or something like that, or an elm or something like that right now, that was like say 24-inch round or something like that. I'd say, okay, yeah, I'd do it, but before I start the job, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go buy a brand new chain just for the falling part of it. I could put the other chain back on for sawing it up, and keep the other chain good just for falling. But if I pre-buy the chains, that's a good idea too. And then maybe about halfway through the day, it's like, okay, you notice that your chain's getting kind of dull, but not super dull. But okay, swap out chains rather than wasting time. Let's say you have one chain as a spare in a box, you never touch it, but you have maybe 2 chains or 3 chains that, okay, you sharpen them up before you start the job, okay, and you go start the job, but by the end of the day, you just keep swapping your chains out, and then when you get home, you can sharpen them there, so you're not wasting time on the job. That works great too, and you can do that over time, and those chains will earn their keep. You know what I mean? Like it's most of the time, one chain will do you the day. With a touch-up sharpening maybe halfway through the day or whatever. Depends how often you hit the ground, how many rocks you hit, stuff like that. I haven't really hit the ground with it good yet. I've nicked the ground with it twice maybe in a year, so that's not. It happens no matter how good you are with a saw, but it does happen, But you don't do that too much. Your chain lasts forever and ever and ever, kind of thing. Anyway, I'm gonna leave it at that because, like I said, I could talk about chainsaws all day, and I guess that's kind of like a pre-review of the MS400. But yeah, it's one of those things that absolutely recommend that saw. I love working with it. Yeah, we'll see what happens for the winter. How much cutting I do with it this winter. I didn't do a lot of cutting with it last year. But like right now, between the October-November window is right when I usually end up doing most of my cutting for people just before the snow goes on the ground. And I mean, I got 2 big trees up there on the ground that I got to clean up for my aunt. I got this tree to fall. Even if I just fall it, I'll be happy. I'll saw it up for stove wood. And then I got all a gazillion trees around the property, which I could fall trees all winter with it. So I'll document it well. I'll document it well. Because I was talking to my aunt last night there. She's like, "Oh, I said I'm going to clear the hill from there right down to the bridge. It'd be a nice view for you." She says, "I know why." She says, "I've seen all the stuff you've been doing. It's great. Keep going. Don't stop. So it's like I say, any one of my relatives, they're just like they see me with a chainsaw. They all they get Cheshire cat smiles when they see me walking around with my chainsaw or my brush cutter. They're like, "Oh, we love what you're doing." It's like, "You mind if I cut? Go ahead." He's like, "Yeah," but I was good. I didn't even say what I was going to cut. They're just, "I don't care. Just do it." Just, you know, you know. Especially when I clear that side, my aunt and uncle's going to like that because they'll be able to see who's coming up and down coming up the highway, right? And my aunt there, she'll like that because she'll be able to sit on the swing and watch, see who's driving by that way. And then me, I got to kind of clear a spot so I can either see what Marvin's up to or see who's sneaking up in my place. You know what I mean? Because it's coming in my driveway. So like, who's there? Well, I don't know. Can't tell. Why? Brushing away. Somebody's got to cut it. That somebody is me. Anyway, yeah, there we go. So that's all the lollygagging I'm going to do on that for today. There we go.